Hey guys, my name is Zarah Nassim, and today I want to share with you something that completely changed my life. It's not every day that we go through a near-death experience, right? Well, it happened to me. I know it may sound a little crazy, but I swear it's true. Before all of this, I was just a 34-year-old single mom living in Dearborn and Michigan, trying to make ends meet. My daughter, Amani, was only 3 years old at the time. We lived in a simple apartment, nothing special. It was a cozy place. But sometimes it seemed too small for all the mess a 3-year-old can make, you know? I worked like crazy to be able to support both of us. I was an administrative assistant at a local company, nothing glamorous, but it paid the bills. I woke up early, dropped Amani off at daycare, ran to work, ran back to pick her up, made dinner, gave her a bath, put her to sleep. You know the routine, right? It was exhausting. Looking back now, I realize how tired I was always on edge. But we do what we need to do for our children, right? Amani was, and still is, the light of my life. Even on the hardest days, her smile made it all worth it. I never imagined that something like this could happen to me. I mean, we always hear about these things, near-death experiences and such, but it seems so far away, right? Something from a movie, a book. Not something that happens to an average Dearborn mom, but it happened, and it changed everything. The way I see life, death, what is really important. You know when they say some people have an epiphany? Well, mine came when I almost died. I'm not going to lie. It's not easy to talk about this. I still get emotional when I remember it. But I feel like I need to share. Maybe it will help someone who is going through something similar, or maybe it will just make people think a little more about life. So, I'm going to tell you how it was, from the beginning. Maybe you believe it, maybe you don't. But I can guarantee one thing. After that, I was never the same. And, look, I'm not saying that in a bad way. No. Was it scary? Yes. But it was also liberating, you know? Anyway, get ready. The story I'm about to tell may seem unbelievable, but it's my story, my truth. And who knows, maybe it will make you look at life in a different way too. It all started on an ordinary weekend. I had spent the entire week running around, barely sleeping properly. Do you know when it seems like there are only 10 hours in a day? That's how I felt. That Friday, I had to stay late at work to finish an urgent report. When I got home, Amani was already asleep. I barely had time to give her a kiss before I fell onto the bed, exhausted. That Saturday, I woke up with a pain in my chest that I had never felt before. At first, I thought it was just tiredness, you know? I tried to ignore it. I drank a very strong coffee, hoping it would get better. But it got worse throughout the day. It was a sharp pain that seemed to squeeze my heart. I started to feel short of breath, in a cold sweat. I was scared, especially thinking about Amani. What if it was something serious? I couldn't risk it. I called my neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, and asked if she could keep an eye on Amani for a few hours. She's a sweetheart. She's always helped me a lot since I moved here. I got in the car and went to the nearest hospital. The 15-minute journey seemed like an eternity. Every red light was torture. I got there sweating, breathing heavily. At reception, I could barely explain what I was feeling. They took me to the emergency room quickly. They asked a lot of questions: if I smoked, if I had a family history of heart problems, if I was under a lot of stress. I answered yes to the last question. Who isn't stressed these days, right? They did some quick tests, an electrocardiogram, that sort of thing. The whole time I was thinking about Amani, if she had woken up, if she was scared because I wasn't there. I felt guilty for leaving like that, but at the same time terrified at the idea that something could happen to me. Who would take care of her? After what seemed like an eternity, the doctor returned. You need to rest. That's what he said. He said that all the tests had come back normal, that it was probably just stress and anxiety. He prescribed some mild tranquilizers and sent me home. I returned home feeling a little silly for having gone to the hospital, but at the same time relieved. Mrs. Thompson said Amani hadn't even woken up. I thanked him 1,000 times, promised that I would return the favor one day. I put Amani to sleep and went to bed, thinking that a good night's sleep would solve everything. I took the tranquilizer the doctor prescribed, hoping it would help me relax. Little did I know that that night would change my life forever. I lay in bed trying to relax, but sleep wouldn't come. I stood there looking at the ceiling, thinking about 1,000 things at the same time. The room was dark, with only the dim light from the lamp. I remember hearing the ticking of the clock on the wall, marking the minutes that passed slowly. I can't say exactly how much time passed, but suddenly I felt my body become super light. It was a strange sensation, as if I were floating. At first, I thought it was the effect of the medicine I had taken. But then, something happened that couldn't be explained with any logic. When I realized I was actually floating, I could see my own body lying on the bed from above. It was scary at first. I thought, oh my God, did I die? I looked at my body there, motionless, and couldn't understand what was happening. I tried to pinch myself, thinking it was a dream, but I didn't feel anything. But at the same time as it was scary, it was an incredible feeling of freedom. All that pain, all the tiredness, had simply disappeared. I felt light as a feather. It was as if the entire weight of the world had been lifted from my shoulders. I stayed there, floating in the room, looking at myself. It was as if I were two people at the same time, one lying in bed and the other floating in the air. I tried to speak, to call for help, but no sound came out. I tried to touch the things around me, the lamp, the nightstand, but my hand passed through them. It was at that moment that I realized this was not a dream. It was real. It was really happening. I felt a mixture of fear and fascination. Fear of the unknown, of what could happen, and fascination with this new reality that was opening up to me. I looked at my body on the bed and saw something I will never forget. It was as if there was a silver thread of light connecting me to my physical body. It was thin, almost transparent, but it shone in a way I can't quite describe. At that moment, I had a profound certainty that death is not the end, that we are more than our physical bodies. It was such a powerful revelation that it almost took my breath away. If I was still breathing, right? I stayed there, floating, for a time that I can't say how long it was. It could have been minutes or hours. Time seemed to make no sense in that state. I just knew I had discovered something incredible, something that would change my worldview forever. After the initial shock of finding myself outside my own body, I began to explore the apartment. It was incredible how I could pass through walls and objects. There were no more physical limits, you know? It was as if I were a ghost in my own home. I walked into the living room, floating a few inches above the floor. Everything seemed normal, but at the same time, different. The colors were more vivid, more intense. I could see details I'd never noticed before, like small cracks in the wall or the intricate pattern of the carpet. I looked out the window and saw the street below. It was late at night and everything was quiet. A street light flickered on the corner, creating dancing shadows on the asphalt. I saw a black cat crossing the street and, for a moment, I had the impression that it was looking directly at me. Can animals feel these things? I went back to the room and looked at my body. It was strange to see myself so still, so dead. My chest rose and fell slightly with my breathing, but other than that, I looked like a statue. My face was serene, as if I was having a pleasant dream. It was ironic to think that I was actually having the most incredible experience of my life. But I didn't feel dead. I felt more alive than ever. All my senses felt heightened. He could hear the low hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the rustle of leaves on the tree outside the window. They were sounds that normally I wouldn't even notice. It was then that I felt some sort of force pulling me towards the front door. It was like someone was calling me, you know? It wasn't a voice I could hear, but a strong feeling, an impulse I couldn't ignore. I started to float towards the door, ready to leave the apartment. I was curious to see what was beyond, where this force was taking me. Part of me was excited about exploring further, seeing where this experience could take me. But then, something made me stop. I passed by Amani's room and saw her sleeping peacefully in her crib. His dark curls spread out on the pillow, his thumb in his mouth as he always did when he slept deeply. It was as if lightning had struck me. I can't leave my daughter alone, I thought. All the excitement of exploration was gone in an instant. All I could think about was my girl, so small, so defenseless. What if I didn't come back? Who would take care of her? At that moment, I felt like a giant rubber band was pulling me back into my body. In the blink of an eye, she was back in bed, panting and confused. When I returned to my body, it was like getting a shock. I opened my eyes suddenly, breathing deeply, as if I had been underwater for a long time. My heart was beating so hard I thought it was going to jump out of my chest. I lay there without moving, trying to understand what had happened. The room was exactly as I had seen from above, the lamp still on, the clock on the wall showing 3:17 in the morning. Everything seemed normal, but at the same time, nothing was normal for me anymore. I got up slowly, afraid that the pain in my chest would return, but I didn't feel anything. In fact, I felt strangely good, light, refreshed, as if I had slept for days. I went to the bathroom mirror and looked at myself for a while. It was me there, the same face as always, but something in my eyes seemed different, more alive, perhaps. I went back to the room and sat on the bed trying to organize my thoughts. Was it real? Had it just been a very vivid dream? But it felt so real. I could remember every detail, every sensation, the room seen from above, the feeling of floating, that thread of light connecting me to my body. I went to Amani's room, just to make sure she was okay. I opened the door slowly, careful not to make any noise. There she was, sleeping peacefully, just as I had seen during my whatever that was. I stood there in the doorway for a while, just watching her sleep. I felt a wave of love and gratitude so strong it almost knocked me over. I went back to bed, but I couldn't sleep. I spent the whole night thinking about what had happened, going over every detail in my head, trying to find some logical explanation. Could it have been the effect of the medicine the doctor prescribed? But how could a simple tranquilizer cause such an intense, real experience? When the sun started to rise, I was still awake. I heard Amani moving around in her room and went there. When she saw me, she smiled that huge smile that always melted my heart. "Good morning, Mommy," she said, as if it were any other day, and it was for her. But for me, nothing else would be the same. I prepared breakfast for both of us, trying to act normally. But my head wouldn't stop. One thing I knew, my life would never be the same. I had seen something beyond this world, something most people never experience. And now, I needed to understand what that meant. In the days that followed, I couldn't stop thinking about the experience. It was like there was a movie playing in my head on loop. Every detail, every sensation, everything kept coming back. I tried to act normally, continue with my usual routine. I took Amani to daycare, went to work, did homework. But my mind was far away, always going back to that night. I started searching online about near-death experiences. I spent hours reading reports, scientific articles, theories. I read several reports similar to mine. People who had left their bodies, seen a light, felt an inexplicable peace. It made me feel calmer, knowing I wasn't going crazy. But at the same time, it raised more questions. Why had this happened to me? What did it mean? At work, people started to notice that I looked different, quieter, more thoughtful. A colleague even asked if I was okay. "I just didn't sleep well," I replied, forcing a smile. How to explain what had happened? Who would believe? I remembered that my uncle Hakeem always talked about these spiritual things. He was kind of eccentric, you know? The black sheep of the family, as my mother used to say. But now, his ideas didn't seem so crazy anymore. I decided to call him. When I told him what had happened, he was super excited. He spoke for almost an hour about astral travel, about how consciousness can separate from the body. He mentioned books, authors, theories that I had never heard of. It was a completely new world for me. My uncle suggested I try doing it again, this time on purpose. At first, I thought the idea was crazy. What if I couldn't come back? What if something went wrong? But the more I thought about it, the more curious I became. What if I could control this experience? What if you could explore more? I started reading everything I could about it. Books about out-of-body experiences, meditation, spirituality. My bookshelf, which previously held only light novels and self-help books, was now full of titles about quantum physics and Eastern philosophy. Some nights, after putting Amani to sleep, I spent hours trying to relax, trying to get out of my body again. Most of the time, nothing happened. I just sat there, lying in the dark, frustrated. But sometimes, I felt that same strange vibration, as if my body was about to float. I decided I would keep trying. Something inside me said that this experience was not by chance, that there was a purpose to it all, and I was determined to find out what it was. Following my uncle's tips, I started trying to get out of my body on purpose. Every night, after putting Amani to sleep, I would lie in bed and try to completely relax. I focused on a point on the ceiling, trying to empty my mind. At first, nothing happened. I just stood there looking at the ceiling, feeling a little silly. But after a few weeks of trying, I started to feel that strange vibration again. It was like my entire body was tingling. It reminded me of the feeling when your foot sleeps, but it was all over the body. On one of those nights, I managed to partially get out. It was different from the first time. I felt trapped, like half of me was outside my body and half was still inside. It was a strange feeling, a little uncomfortable. I could see the room around me, but it was like I was seeing through fogged glass. I tried to move, but it was difficult. It was like swimming against the current. I managed to float to the bedroom door, but I couldn't get through it like before. I stayed there, half trapped, half floating, for a few minutes. Then, suddenly, I felt this pull back to my body. When I came back, I lay there, my heart pounding. It had worked. Well, more or less. It hadn't been like the first time, but it was a start. I was so excited that I almost woke Amani up to tell her. Of course I didn't do that. How do you explain to a 3-year-old that mommy had just floated across the room? Over the next few nights, I kept trying. Sometimes I managed to partially come out. Sometimes nothing happened. It was frustrating, like trying to catch water with your hands. You manage it for a moment, but it soon slips through your fingers. I started to notice patterns. It was easier when I was really relaxed, when I had had a calm day. On stressful nights at work or when Amani was sick, it was almost impossible. I realized that there was a whole world beyond what we normally see. A world that most people have no idea exists. And I was just scratching the surface. It was exciting and scary at the same time. Sometimes I wondered if I was becoming obsessed. If not, I should just forget all this and go back to my normal life. But then I remembered that first experience, that feeling of freedom and peace, and I knew I couldn't stop. There was something important there, something I needed to understand. And so, night after night, I kept trying, determined to unravel this mystery, to understand what was happening to me. Because deep down, I knew this was just the beginning of something much bigger. During one of these attempts to leave the body, something incredible happened. It was a Friday night. I remember it well. Amani had slept early, tired after a day at the park. I was relaxed, had drunk chamomile tea and done a short meditation before going to bed. I managed to get out of my body completely this time. It was like the first time. I was floating freely around the room, feeling as light as a feather. I decided to explore a little more. I walked through the bedroom door as if it didn't exist and went to the living room. It was then that I saw it. A bluish light approaching. It was like nothing I had ever seen before. It was like a ball of energy, dense and vibrant. It wasn't an ordinary light, you know? It was as if it were alive, pulsating. When it came close to me, I felt an incredible energy surrounding me. It was a feeling of love, of peace, so intense it almost hurt. I felt welcomed, protected, as if I were in my mother's arms when I was a child. That's when I heard a voice, not with my ears, but directly in my mind. It was a male voice, strong and authoritative, but at the same time gentle. She asked, "Would you like to leave or do you want to stay?" I was panicked. I didn't know what to answer. What did leave mean? Was it dying? And staying meant returning to my body? I was afraid of what might happen if I chose to leave. I thought about Amani, sleeping in the next room. I couldn't leave her. I tried to speak, to ask what that meant, but no sound came out. The light was still there, patiently, waiting for my response. It was as if time had stopped. Finally, I was able to think clearly. I want to stay. The moment he said this, the light began to move away. I felt a mixture of relief and regret, as if I had missed a unique opportunity. I tried to return to my body with all my strength. It was a struggle, like swimming against a strong current. But I did it. I came back with that same ringing in my ears as the first time. I lay in bed, shaking, thinking about what had happened. That voice, that light. What were they? What did they mean? Had I made the right choice? I spent the rest of the night awake, going over every detail in my mind. When the sun rose, I was still there, looking at the ceiling, wondering what it all meant. One thing I knew, that meeting had changed something in me. I was no longer the same person who had laid in that bed hours before. And somehow, I knew that wouldn't be the last time I would see that light. One night I had an out-of-body experience that was unlike any other. It started as usual. I relaxed, felt that familiar vibration, and found myself floating above my bed. But this time, something propelled me out of the house. I floated across the roof, seeing my neighborhood from above. The lights in the houses, the parked cars, everything seemed so small from there. That's when I noticed a presence next to me. It was a being of light, not like the blue light I saw before, but a more defined, almost human figure, radiating a soft golden light. Without words, I understood that I should follow this being. In the blink of an eye, we were traveling at incredible speed. The scenario has changed drastically. Suddenly we found ourselves flying over a dark, foggy valley. Down below I saw something that gave me goosebumps. There were countless shadowy shapes, which looked like people, wandering around aimlessly. They made wailing sounds that reached us. It was a harrowing sight. I understood, without anyone telling me, that they were lost souls, trapped between worlds. The being of light next to me made a gesture, and, suddenly, several other luminous beings appeared. They began to descend towards the lost souls. I watched as they gently approached, offering comfort and guidance. Some souls reacted with fear initially, others with immediate relief. I watched in fascination as the beings of light worked. They seemed to be helping souls free themselves from some kind of invisible weight. As this happened, the dark forms began to shine as well, ascending with the beings of light. I telepathically asked the being next to me what was happening. The answer came not in words, but in feelings and images. I understood that this was rescue and healing work. These souls, for various reasons, had not been able to move on after physical death. They were trapped by fear, regret, or attachment to the material world. I was moved by the compassion and love I felt emanating from the beings of light. There was no judgment, just a genuine desire to help. For a moment, I felt the desire to come down and help too, but I understood that it wasn't my role. Not yet. As we watched, the valley became clearer. Each rescued soul seemed to take with it a piece of darkness. It was a deeply moving experience. When we returned, I found myself again floating above my house. The being of light said goodbye silently and disappeared. I returned to my body, opening my eyes with tears streaming down my face. This experience gave me a new perspective on the afterlife and the work that happens on the spiritual planes. It reinforced my belief that there is much more to our existence than we can see or understand in our everyday lives. After these experiences, my life completely changed. It was as if I had woken up from a long sleep and was seeing the world for the first time. The things that once seemed so important, or were money, status, material things, suddenly seemed so small, so insignificant. I started to see the world in a different way. The colors seemed more vibrant, the sounds clearer. I paid attention to things that previously went unnoticed. The birdsong in the morning, the smile of a stranger on the street, the smell of grass after the rain. It was as if every moment was precious, every experience a gift. My relationship with Amani became even stronger. I realized how precious life is, how important every moment with it is. I started taking more time to play with her, to really be present. Sometimes, while she played, I would just watch, marveling at her purity and joy. I wondered if children were no longer connected to this other world that I had glimpsed. At work, people started to notice the change. I was calmer, more centered. The problems that used to stress me out now seemed so easy to solve. My boss even commented that I looked more mature, more confident. Little did he know why. I started to become more interested in spirituality, to meditate, to try to better understand what had happened to me. I read books about quantum physics, Eastern philosophy, near-death experiences. Everything that previously seemed silly to me now made sense in a profound way. I started telling some people close to me about my experiences. Some thought I had gone crazy. They looked at me with pity or concern. Others were fascinated and wanted to know more. My best friend, Sarah, received it best. She not only believed in me, she began to meditate with me, to explore this new world. But most importantly, I knew it was real. I knew I had discovered something incredible about life and death. I was no longer afraid of dying. In fact, sometimes I found myself yearning to experience that feeling of peace and unconditional love again. At the same time, I felt more connected to life than ever before. Every day was a new opportunity to learn, to grow, to love. I started volunteering at a local shelter on the weekends, feeling like I needed to somehow give back to all this new understanding I had received. And so, day after day, I rediscovered the world and myself. It was a sometimes scary, sometimes exhilarating, but always transformative journey.